What's up, everyone? Welcome to Simulation. We have an episode that we haven't covered this topic yet, which is super interesting. We're going to be talking about sociology. We're going to be talking about political science. We're going to be talking about political communication. We're going to be talking about peering inside the propaganda machine. We have Dr. Emma L. Briant with us.
Hi there. It's great to be here.
To this show. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes.
It's fun to be here.
It is super fun to have you, especially because you're a visiting scholar right now at Stanford.
Yeah, I know.
So welcome to our Bay Area.
I'm really enjoying it. It's a great place to spend the summer.
Yeah, and you live and spend most of your time in the United Kingdom.
Yes, absolutely. My main role is as a senior lecturer and in the journalism department at University of Essex. So I'm just over here on my sabbatical doing some research over here.
And how many years have you been doing the senior lecturing at Essex?
Actually only a year. Before that I was a lecturer at University of Sheffield, yeah.
And Sheffield's also in UK?
Yep, both in the UK, in England, yeah.
In journalism as well?
Yes, those were both journalism departments, although I'm a sociologist and political scientist.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to unpack. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we've had some insanity regarding propaganda in the last couple of years.
Haven't we all?
Yeah.
That would describe my whole life, I think. Insanity with propaganda.
Yeah.
Yes, that's basically my main specialism, is critiquing and studying systems of propaganda and the people responsible for them.
Yes, and so maybe start us off with the thesis and about political propaganda, what you've been studying.
Sure. So I first sort of stumbled into this as part of my undergraduate studies at Coventry University. Just after 9/11, I was doing my undergrad degree, and one of the final year modules I got to do was called Propaganda and Foreign Policy. And I thought, ooh, how exciting is that? This sounds fascinating. And I just kind of fell in love with the general topic and decided to do my PhD on that. I mean, we had covered sort of propaganda in all sorts of historical contexts. And I decided, actually, you know what? There's a hell of a lot of that going on right now in the world. And I want to look at that in the contemporary context. So I decided that my methodology for my PhD at Glasgow University was going to be interviewing propagandists. And I thought, that's kind of naively, like, I can do that. That's fine. That'll be easy. And I do my first presentation and everybody is like, they're not going to talk to you,
Yeah.
No one is going to talk to you. So I was like, I wasn't going to let that get to me. So what I did was I went out to the States and I was there for like about 9 months.
This is a tough role. This is not me interviewing scientists and entrepreneurs. This is interviewing people that purposely plug in manipulations into the social.
Absolutely.
And why are they going to reveal to you what they do?
So my thesis was basically about British and American propaganda, so the stuff that governments do to communicate in the context of war, both abroad and also selling war to the people at home. And I decided I was going to study this by interviewing those people who do the communicating, the propagandists themselves. I got interviews both in the UK and in the US, and I actually went over and spent 9 months in America, in Washington, DC, meeting with people like CIA station chiefs, people in the White House, and people who had been out in Afghanistan and Iraq, and I got loads of interviews as well with contractors who had been hired to sort of market war and sell certain ideas to people in Afghanistan, for example, and to also justify the wars that were ongoing. And that was at a time when you had really, shocking things coming out in the media as well about atrocities that had been committed by military personnel in Iraq and so on, and by both countries. And it was a very difficult time when it comes to attacks that were taking place, and how you respond to, terrorists, and try to counter terrorism and stop it getting worse. Those people were trying to recruit, and they were using atrocities to do that. So you're put in this very difficult position, I think, as a country, of how you try to address problems that are real and existing in relation to terrorism, but also there was an effort to sort of justify, legitimize actions that had already been taken, and also try to obscure things that had happened that were really, really questionable and wrong, but gave the country a lot of sort of bad PR. So I was really interested in all of that, and also the process of digitalization, because we were entering an internet age. We had entered the internet age. The military were kind of slow to catch up on that, and they were transforming the field of propaganda. And that's partly why they were bringing in all these contractors like SCL Group, who I interviewed as part of my studies. My PhD eventually became a book called Propaganda and Counterterrorism, Strategies for Global Change. And I interviewed some of these people from SCL Group for that book as well. These were contractors hired by British and American militaries and State Department and so on for doing counterterrorism work. And I later on realized that they became involved in politics as well. Now, this company actually is the parent company of a company you will have heard of, Cambridge Analytica, who have been across the news in recent times. But at that time, nobody had heard of them at that time when I was interviewing them. Mm-hmm. But because I developed all these strong links and a relationship with the people in the company through interviewing them for over a long time, I knew more about what they were doing, and I was able to get access more easily when it came to doing interviews later. So my first interest was really in defense, security, propaganda, how the state does its propaganda. And then also afterwards, after I'd finished that PhD, I started writing about refugees and how they're represented in the media. And I did a second book called Bad News for Refugees, which looks at their misrepresentation. Yeah. So I was always interested in that as well.
Yes. Okay. So let's unpack there. So, you painted a vision for me of government using propaganda to identify both malevolent intent in a different place in the world to justify the war, but also a sort of domestic propagation of both that image as well as maybe an image of not only malevolence there to justify it, but also sometimes something that makes people feel a certain way about another group of people, like you were saying that in research in your second thing that you wrote about Muslims. And another case was that you were mentioning about just in general this notion that manipulation can occur from a government to justify the way that they are behaving across the world.
Absolutely, and counterterrorism over such a long period of time, it became, in order to sort of justify increasing spending on counterterrorism, these conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan and so forth, you ended up with, very, very negative representations of Muslims in the media, because Muslims were being overly reported as being responsible for terrorism. in comparison to positive stories about Muslims.
Yeah.
They would always be in the media as terrorists or potential terrorists, or, you know, because we were fighting a war, and this was the way that the war was being packaged and sold to us. And so
and you're interviewing people, which is giving you this insight. You're interviewing the propagandists, and that's what's teaching you about this. And then there's also the digitization of propaganda, which is no longer just in newspapers, but now it's on the internet, in our news feeds.
Exactly. Yeah. And that totally changed the landscape as well, because it was globalized. And you ended up with a situation where, for example, propaganda used to be targeted at domestic audiences very differently to audiences abroad. And that became a difficult problem to manage when you have the internet making it possible for anything to go anywhere in a way. So then we ended up in this world of like having to develop micro-targeting to target specific audiences differently and so on online. And that basically grew out of a lot of the problems that we were having when it came to domestic and foreign targeting. You end up with enemies at home as well, who the military might be, not specifically the military, but the authorities might be targeting domestic audiences as well. And that creates all sorts of problems because there are rules over what you can target at home and abroad and so forth. So it gets very complicated when it comes to how you respond to domestic threats, for example. So those kinds of changing rules and how lines became blurred between what was targeted at home and what was targeted abroad are the sorts of things that I got really interested in. Mm-hmm. As well as the sort of, racism and how that was being shaped as well, racist representations of Muslims and so forth, yeah.
So the propaganda plays a certain way now in the digital age where it can be easy to justify going and making a military move into a certain area due to there being bad people there or there being bad people at home and needing to change migration efforts or immigration efforts. This is something that part of your work is also on migration.
Yeah.
So it seems to be that the background was kind of perfect for this. A lot of interviewing of propagandists and learning more about the way that we're. So this is a couple years ago is the formation of a lot of this for you.
So
right?
the book was published in 2015 on propaganda, and that was just after the one on refugees. I then, after that, started to sort of continue working in this kind of area, but I got really interested in the political context of why this is happening, how we can't, maybe direct more of our money away from this military-industrial complex, if you like, that's so self-generating, and towards, resolving problems like economic inequality. So one of the things I was interested in is why the Democrats can't communicate this topic of economic inequality.
Fuck the bore. Stop that. There's no money in peace, love, and understanding. Will you stop this nonsense?
Okay.
I'm just kidding. I told you I'm devil's advocate in
Well,
the show.
I
had
started to study the politics of America at a really interesting time. I came over here doing a short spell at George Washington University, where I was doing some research on the elections in 2016 and 2017. And it was all during this time when economic inequality could not have been more stark, and the ways in which different groups were being manipulated in the US became really, really, clear to me. And I realized halfway through that time, this group that I had studied, SCL Group, the parent company of Cambridge Analytica, they had had involvement in all of this. The company that sprung up from them, from this defense contractor, had begun working for Trump. And so I decided I was going to try and get interviews with them, because I already had done a lot of, had a lot of connections. And I managed to get in quite good, easy interviews. And I also realized that they had been working on Brexit as well, because that was being reported by the journalist Carol Cadwallader from The Guardian. She did some amazing reporting on that.
So let's get a little bit of background here. Okay, so let's talk. There's a billionaire. His name's Robert Mercer.
Yes.
And so Robert Mercer helped with a lot of the Steve Bannon's company. What was the company called? Breitbart. And then Robert Mercer was also a funder of SCL Group.
Yes.
For Cambridge Analytica. Mm-hmm. And then why would now you're talking about Trump election, which Robert Mercer wanted to get Trump in, and okay. And then there's the Cambridge Analytica arm and the Brexit, also the Brexit and the 2016 election. Okay, so there's these two things that we're going to be talking about.
Yeah.
Now, why would they want to take a meeting with a journalist? Why would someone?
I'm not a journalist. I'm an academic.
An academic studying propaganda. Mm-hmm. Like,
why? They knew me already. I had interviewed them for my Propaganda and Counterterrorism book.
But if they know that they have a vulnerability of potentially having the 2016 influence revealed, or the Brexit, their influence on these two things revealed.
These people don't feel vulnerable, or they didn't at the time.
They want to feel like cocky.
They were very arrogant.
Yeah.
They are by definition people who feel invulnerable. They think that they can't be shaken at all by anyone or anything. They think if they talk to the media, they expect to have an article on the front page of the Times, perhaps, which might be annoying, but they don't expect it's going to destroy their company. They talk to an academic, they expect that those people will publish their stuff in some academic journal that will never ever get read, or in a book that will get read by about 200 other academics. And normally that's the case. My last book did not make lots of money. People tend not to buy academic books for their bedside table reading material, And so even these people wouldn't normally even be destroyed by an article in the media, but even less so by academic work usually, and that's a shame. And I think a lot more academics need to be looking at the dark side of propaganda. There's a lot of people who spend an awful lot of time looking at how America can talk more positively about itself, and not looking beneath the surface of what's going wrong with the systems of power. And that kind of research is very, very difficult to do. It's difficult to get people talking to you. I do have a lot of skill with interviewing. And I had known these people over a long period of time, built up a long amount of relationships, if you like, and had done critical work before, but it wasn't the sort of thing that they were expecting was going to destroy them in this kind of way. Now that company has now gone bust, Cambridge Analytica. However,
they don't do any work anymore?
No, they went bankrupt.
They went bankrupt?
Through the efforts of all of the people who were revealing what they did.
And what was the guy's name?
Alexander Nix.
And then what was the guy's name that whistleblowed first?
Chris Wiley with
Chris
the
Wiley.
pink hair.
Yeah, Chris Wiley.
So
then that process caused Cambridge Analytica to go bankrupt.
Yeah, all of these revelations.
All these
now,
revelations.
Some of the companies are still...
But SCL Group's not bankrupt.
SCL Group, some of it went bankrupt. SCL Insights is still going, I believe. and there are other companies that have sprung up from the ashes. Now, this is something that we really need to...
It's not going to stop. It's only going to keep going, especially
with... And Datapropria is one of those, and they are now working for Trump in 2020. So Datapropria.
Datapropria. Is that a Mercer-funded organization? Datapropria.
Yes, so they're
back
in
some more
action
research.
Again. Yes, so...
it's going to get even worse with artificial intelligence, and you can't even distinguish between what is, if you're watching this video right now, sure, you see me, but we can synthesize my voice and synthesize my face. Deep fakes. We've had Dr. Roman Yampolsky on our show before, and he is a deep researcher into...
It's already happening.
Into deep fakes.
This is already happening. It's getting scarier with each day.
It's really bad, yeah.
So you can't tell if the video that you're watching, if Donald Trump's going to send a tweet after you watch a video about him saying something and just say, hey, that wasn't me, that was a deep fake.
Yeah.
I never thought about that.
Exactly.
So then the whole process of whoever
But then he almost doesn't need to do that anyway, because nobody seems to care anyway when he lies.
Which this is very Orwellian what we're speaking about, because you can't tell what reality is anymore from fake.
Well, today he was at the rally in West Virginia, and apparently everybody was chanting "Lock her up," and about Clinton, at this rally at a time when his campaign manager and so on, Manafort and Cohen as well as in court, and they're, I think Manafort got, convicted on 8. What was it? Does anybody know the exact? I don't want to say it wrong. You don't know? Manafort, the news today.
Oh, I didn't hear it.
And Cohen was just indicted, wasn't he?
Yes, Cohen was indicted, but there was also a ruling on Manafort. I think he got... anyway, it doesn't matter.
So is the issue that this seems to be a little fascist, that the leadership is just canceling out any voices or opposition that is trying to go against what the leadership believes in?
Yes. Well, in what sense? Sorry, you've lost me there. You jumped into something else.
Just that at any point, if it seems to be anyone is countering the perspective of the leadership, that they get locked up, or does that seem to be the worry?
Well, I think one of the worries is that they're wondering if Trump will pardon these people once they're convicted. I think that was one of the things that they were worried about. But
I have the skinny on Manafort. He was found guilty of 5 tax fraud charges, 1 charge of hiding foreign bank accounts, and 2 counts of bank fraud. He faces a maximum of 80 years in prison.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what they're worrying, what Trump will be worrying about, is whether these people have squealed and how much they squealed.
Wait, so that Manafort
was his campaign manager. So he's now been convicted of fraud, and obviously there's a big FBI investigation ongoing.
So then the question is this real or not?
Well, yes, and obviously Trump would cry fake news, witch hunt, and so on.
Hopefully
and
the
that's why I
world
mentioned the West Virginia rally, because all of his fans were just chanting "Lock her up," and it's highly ironic considering his campaign manager and his lawyer and right-hand man is in court at the moment on federal charges. This is really, really important, and nobody who supports him either cares or even perhaps knows, because they're all watching Breitbart or Fox News perhaps or something, and it's a very different version of reality that's being played to them.
I'm also just, although it could very well be that this is a extremely serious and correct charge that's being applied, at the same time it could be a smear campaign. Is that correct?
For whom?
For Trump.
For Trump.
Manafort, what's happening could be a smear campaign?
I doubt that somehow. I doubt that.
It's just that we don't know the answer, right? It's
Manafort's been convicted, so I think the court agreed that it wasn't a smear campaign. And I don't want to question the judge and jury.
Alan, you've got a look on your face whenever you play that advocate. That look on your face is always the same.
I think it's for the courts to decide,
innocent
really.
And, you know.
I know nothing, but I'm skeptic of everything. But the jury is the one that knows the evidence in the case,
Sure,
that
exactly.
studied it to a degree that I know 0% about.
Sure.
So I'm just skeptical, but if the decision's made, I would need to spend months researching the information to understand anything.
Yeah.
So of course I don't know shit. Yeah. So,
But anyway, yeah.
So we're unpacking the 2016 election. We're unpacking current 2018 news. We're unpacking Brexit as well.
Sure.
With all
So I
these
was working on this
conversations.
book on the Democrats, actually, and it was called "What's Wrong with the Democrats: Media Bias, Inequality, and the Rise of Donald Trump." And I was doing a lot of these interviews with Cambridge Analytica for that, actually. And as I was doing the interviews, I started to realize the kinds of things that I was getting were really, really important and contradicted a lot of the claims that were being made publicly and even in Parliament about in the testimony that Cambridge Analytica were giving of in relation to the elections in the US and also in relation to Brexit. So I started to realize that this was really important stuff and that they were telling me things that they were not telling other people. And the
Should we
fake
play
news
some
inquiry.
of the audio clips?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Well,
That'd be a good
firstly, I
time?
should say
Okay.
before you play that,
Yeah.
that the fake news inquiry compelled me to submit all the evidence I had in relation to them. So I had to give them all of my interviews with the different people from Cambridge Analytica, SCL, as well as the Brexit campaign, and they published some of that, as well as 3 contextualizing explanatory essays that I did, that I'd written. Can you put the other one? So it's really important to say that because
Who are we looking at?
because they actually published a series of audio clips. And you're just about to hear one of the audio clips. This is Nigel Oakes, who was the CEO of SCL Group. Now, that's the defense contractor I talked about.
The things that resonate,
And
sometimes
he,
to attack.
And they were the parent company of Cambridge Analytica. So what you're going to hear is him commenting on the kind of strategy.
This is you in a.
This is a clip from the interview I did with him.
And how do you score an interview with the
Score?
Or how do you?
How do I get
How
it?
do you get in? Yeah.
Well, I knew him before this. I'd interviewed him already. And I just wrote him another email saying, I'm really interested in interviewing you for...
As an academic studying propaganda,
Yeah.
I'm trying to learn more. I'm trying to write a book about
Yes,
it.
I told him about the book.
And the person thinks that they're immortal and that they're able to disclose how they're making propaganda in a way that will be looked at by some academics, and that's
Yeah.
not going to harm them in the long term on a mainstream media outlet. Things
Yeah,
like
exactly. And I was interested in interviewing him about a number of different topics. So I was also researching the military use of propaganda as well, and work that he was doing in that regard. So I interviewed him over a number of different topics, and he was very happy to talk to me.
So military will fund propaganda that okays them to make military moves in other areas of the world, or?
They were doing counterterrorism, and they were doing targeting, sort of what they called target audience analysis. So that is research which helps them to understand an audience that they're hoping to target with propaganda. And they do sort of personality testing, gather intelligence, analyze it, and develop messaging based on all of that. So that's the kind of work that they were doing.
So it's military-funded psychometric profile analysis.
Exactly, that kind of thing. Yeah.
And then once they do the psychometric profile analysis, then they push propaganda towards that direction?
Yeah, essentially,
That makes what military decision?
Well, it depends on the purpose of what they're
And this
wanting
is
to
UK
achieve.
and US?
Yes, they were working also for NATO and doing training in Eastern Europe as well for countering Russia. They worked on this topic quite extensively.
There's a lot to unpack knowing 0% about it.
Absolutely. But this particular clip which you're about to hear is him talking about what Cambridge Analytica were doing for Trump and explaining the kind of messaging that was involved.
This is 2016?
No, this is talking about the election in 2016. But this was actually an interview in late 2017.
Late 2017.
October.
Okay, so about a year ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
The things that resonate, sometimes to attack the other group and know that you're going to lose them, is going to reinforce and resonate your group, which is why, Hitler, I'm going to be very careful about saying so, mustn't ever say this off the record, but of course Hitler attacked the Jews because he didn't have a problem with the Jews at all. But the people didn't like the Jews, and so if the people saw, he could just use them to say, so he just leveraged an artificial enemy. Well, this is exactly what Trump did. He leveraged a Muslim. I mean, it was a real enemy. ISIS is but how big a threat is ISIS really to America? Really. I mean, we're still talking about 9/11.
Okay.
Well, 9/11 is a long time ago.
What I
the
find
things that resonate, sometimes
what I find quite sickening, actually, is the fact that this guy built his entire career off the back of counterterrorism, and the company has expanded off the back of that. That was the original company. This was an election that was very much focused around, the threat of, migrants, of terrorists and so forth. And he makes it very clear that he doesn't see this as a genuine threat. And that he sees it as an artificial enemy. Muslims are being created into an artificial enemy. This is a company that, used this as a cynical tool, and they knew exactly what they were doing in othering and marginalizing a whole religious group in a way that they are comparing to what the Nazis did.
Okay, let's unpack. Ron, quick question. Are we at 45 right now?
We're at 30.
Oh, okay, great. So that's what I thought. Awesome. So, okay, let's unpack that clip, because in the clip, it is said that there was an artificial enemy as the Jews, and and Hitler didn't actually have a hatred. But
yes, I was shockingly anti-Semitic. I nearly fell over when I heard this. And I know you probably heard it said off the record. This was, I gave my entire interviews to Parliament, and they've chosen to publish certain things that they felt were extremely important for the public to hear. And this particular clip, I think, really conveys the, the ideology behind these people, their motivations, their ideas, which were really fundamental to shaping the type of approach. I mean, it's important context for people needed to hear.
So, Robert Mercer funds Nigel Oakes's SCL group, which he speaks to.
No. SCL group was actually funded by conservative British funders called the Gabs.
100% funded by? Or
I think so.
So it was a large amount funded by British conservatives group.
Yes, they are people who have funded the British Conservative Party, and yes, so they were British funders. I think they have a
and then the SCL group was then hired by Mercer to
no. SCL group wasn't. What happened was in about 2012 or 2013, they began setting up an American company that was part of the group. Okay, so it's a sort of an offshoot of the company, which was able to do work in American politics because they were setting it up as an American company. British company isn't allowed to run an American campaign. So they set this up as kind of like a front, or some sort of organization that would be able to run those campaigns for them. That was funded by the Mercers. So
the U.S. subsidiary was?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, okay, now it makes more sense.
And that is a part of the overall group, okay?
Yeah. Okay, so then the subsidiary in the United States that's actually able to do the propaganda in the United States is funded by the Mercers. And
yes,
then,
but they were all drawing on a common core of methodological
value
ideas
systems,
and research.
principles, and research. So when you're in your conversation with Nigel Oakes, he then goes on to say that how big of a threat do you actually think ISIS is? How big of a threat do you actually think?
Yeah, and he
Muslims
tells me
are?
as well that he basically knows that they that the violence in America isn't coming from Muslims. He talks about how
where is it coming from then?
it's coming from white supremacists, basically. He talks. There's another clip, but we won't probably play that. But he talks about how it's actually not Muslims that are causing the threat. It's essentially white Americans who are.
Let's change the language, because I think we have a lot of friends that are Muslims that are fantastic people, and Islam in itself has a long history of art, culture, music, food, grace, and beauty. So let's change the language to ISIS or to radical Islam.
But that's the point, you see, because he's saying.
I think it's really, I know. I think I know where you're going with this, but I think it's really important to identify that nuance as something that is a precise thing that we are talking about in this conversation. Because if we do that, then it keeps everyone at home understanding that we're talking about a specific nuance. So I just want, now this is why I'm bringing this up. The specific nuance of radical Islamic terrorism like ISIS that's going on in the world is a major problem.
Of course,
it's a huge global issue, and it's happening in Europe and it's happening in the United States.
Yeah, well, let's see what happens to you when people start bombing your country and just pointing your finger just because of what you practice.
If you look at the statistics, the amount of
it's not quite
violence.
that easy either, Ron. I think that's a huge oversimplification of what's going on. There's a long history of interpretations of specific aspects of the Quran and the religious text of Islam that indicate the okayness of genital mutilation, of killing people that leave the religion, apostates. That this is a major bug in the code of that religion, and people like Sam Harris are walking out on the middle of a tightrope out into the middle of the political scene, saying things like this is absolutely not okay, that this is still happening in the world. And even Majid Nawaz, someone that is a former Muslim that still is Muslim, but that has came out and said that I do not support those ideologies. I am not with them. And there's tons of people, Ayaan Hirsi Ali, that are saying this type of stuff.
It works both ways on all religions, the good and the bad, and the ugly among us.
So let's make this really, really, really clear. I'm going to be very careful with how I choose my words. This has nothing to do with the good in Islam and Muslims. Those are amazing people and amazing aspects of culture and life and everything. But there is ISIS. There is no such thing as ISIS for Christianity or Judaism or Buddhism or Hinduism. There is no such thing as that.
There have been, and
KKK
is
a perfect example of Christianity's
Does it exist
terrorist
in
organization?
Anyway,
white supremacists are causing more political violence in the US than Muslims are, and I think that was the point that Nigel Oakes was making in the interview that I did with him. And I think it's a really important point.
So there's objective evidence
there is.
that U.S. supremism, that nationalistic people that...
White supremacists.
White supremacists are causing more deaths and injuries in the United States than radical Islamic terrorists. Yes. Okay.
And actually, that's the government statistics as well.
I will need to look into that and understand that. But let's hold that. That was the United States. Let's talk about the world. Because white nationalists in the world are not causing more deaths than ISIS
is. But we're talking right now about the United States.
But now we've created a separation between those two things.
And I wasn't talking about that. I was talking about the United States, and this was a conversation about the United States. He is talking about the United States.
Okay, when people are reading a religious text overseas and then committing crimes overseas, like killing people that leave the religion.
If we look at other parts of the world, there are horrific, ongoing problems in places like Afghanistan, Iraq, that have not been resolved by conflicts that are supposedly over. There is awful violence that is afflicting these regions, and this is an ongoing problem that we have not helped, by the way. It is causing migration flows. That is a problem. There are awful situations of extremism, and not just extremism, but violence. And I'm not saying that those things don't exist. What I am saying is that the greater problem in the United States right now is white supremacist violence.
Okay, so now that we've packaged this into a very nuanced state, we've identified 8 areas around the world have a serious issue with radical Islamic terrorism. The United States, on the other hand, has a bigger problem with white supremacy. That's how we've identified this. Okay, I need to learn more about the white supremacy being horrific.
Read the fucking history book.
Yeah, that's not actually what I'm, here to talk about really today. I was talking about my research, which isn't specifically on white nationalism. I mean, if you should get someone who's a specialist on white nationalism if you want to go into that specific thing in a greater way. What I'm focused on with my research is propaganda. So, where I would like to go, if you don't mind, is back to my research, if that's okay. Because
I think it's really important to identify what we identified.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's important context.
Yeah. Well, let's jump back in. Let's do it.
Okay, sure. Perhaps,
especially because that audio clip in itself, the reason why we just went on that 10-minute conversation is because in that audio clip, it is made clear that who Nigel Oakes is referencing. Nigel Oakes is saying that Muslims are not the problem in the United States.
Exactly.
That's what he said. And again, he said the word Muslims, but then he also said ISIS.
But I think
he said both, right? Is that true?
No. Okay. So. Well, if you wanted to, we could play the clip again, and because I don't want to paraphrase him and get, but I think the most important thing that we can take away from that is actually that they know that Muslims are not the biggest threat in America, and that they were created, or communications were created through that campaign to make them into an artificial enemy. Yep. That's what he said.
Reference just like with Hitler and the Jews.
To other them. Yeah. And I think that's a really important point. And that process is not just something that happened in the US as well. If we look at the campaign that happened in the UK previous to the US elections through Brexit in the referendum to leave the EU, that was a campaign, the Leave.eu campaign. Maybe you could bring that picture up again now. The other one, the previous one that you had before that. Yes. So here you can see the people associated with the Leave.eu campaign. So Nigel Farage, who was really the figurehead of that campaign. You've got Aaron Banks, who funded Leave.eu. You've got Andy Wigmore, who was their communication director.
Oh, this is the question I asked you beforehand as well. What's wrong with Brexit, Britain leaving the European Union?
Personally, I voted to remain. And the reasons I voted to remain were because I think we have very complex transnational problems today in our world. That includes things like terrorism. It includes things like fake news now, more than ever. It also includes migration and climate change. And from climate change, we're going to get more and more migration. We are entering into a period of our future where we are going to have to work together more than ever before. And I think that transnational relationships and political structures that are international and cooperative are deeply important to resolving those kinds of problems. We need to work together and not be trying to float off into the Atlantic Ocean on our own at the moment. We are not the world superpower that we like to think we sometimes are. And I think it's really important to actually work with the rest of Europe to come up with cooperative strategies to manage numbers of migrants and how we respond to different problems. So that's why I chose to vote that way. Personally, I felt
I tend to agree with you in terms of the long term,
Yeah.
that there is going to be some sort of a major push across the world to figure out how to work together in the long term. How we get there, though, is a very deeply complicated
Totally.
and nuanced sort of variable equation that nobody really has the answer to, but is things like the UK leaving.
We're
the
not.
European
We're going to be
Union.
another lost civilization. This planet is littered with them. And we're next.
We have, especially with deep fakes and AI and biotech explosion in malevolent ways, we never know what could happen. So we really have to talk about the ethics and the morality and working together. And however we get there in the short term is going to be an effort of a lot of people trying to work together to figure these things out.
For violence. We'll get there through violence, of course.
That hopefully we can get there with less violence. That'd be fantastic. I think.
They'll never take me alive.
So yes, continue.
Well, so I was also appalled by the very racist nature of the campaign. It was very anti-immigration, and I think personally that migrants aren't the biggest problem in the UK. They are not even close to it. I think these people are a greater problem in the UK, personally. But
the people that wanted to leave.
The elite who are keen to profit out of groups. Marginalized groups and turning people against each other.
So you label the 6 people in here as people that are
driving divisions in our country.
Driving divisions for profit and marginalizing people?
And
Basically,
control, to maintain control. They'd rather have us fighting amongst ourselves, and they can scheme to, just maintain control.
So I found the tone of the entire campaign pretty off-putting and appalling. I honestly felt quite dismayed at the Brexit vote. However, the outcome of the vote was not the issue for me. I have continued to
the
feel
propaganda
concerned.
that caused the outcome was the issue?
I felt concerned about both the propaganda, but also about the illegality and the rule breaking of our electoral laws.
But it's not
happened.
illegal to make propaganda for a political election.
No.
So
but
then-
it's the kind of propaganda I think
So
was a problem.
It's ethically immoral, but it's not illegal.
At the breaking
right?
but there were laws broken, and that is what bothers me.
Which laws were broken?
So, for instance, there were campaign contributions and so forth that broke the rules. They put too much money into the campaign.
Wait, can we just go back to that image really quick?
Breaking point?
There was also
the image that
coordination
the
between
image that just showed up.
Believe and
see here's my one thing. If we can take away one thing from my skepticism, is just that I believe that there are good people in here. I also believe that there are some bad apples in here. And if I can't...
Who are these people? You don't even know who they are.
If I can't... You're absolutely right. That's exactly my point. If you don't know who the people are and you've opened up your borders and you're having a flood of people that you don't know and haven't done any background checks on entering your country, you have that in some cases.
That is not actually the case, though.
Well, how is that not the case with people coming in on boats across the Mediterranean?
People are not arriving in Britain on boats. They are arriving in. Look, this is Britain, okay? This is a different country.
Fair enough.
They are arriving in places
like. If this is not an actual situation, then
no. And this is, been choreographed very carefully with a picture. I don't know where that picture came from.
But the
in
general
order
point
to give an impression that these people are arriving in the UK and that the UK is in breaking point. Okay.
By the way, this could be an image of 1,000 white people or 1,000
but it's
purple
not, is
people,
it?
And the whole
They're
point
brown.
would be you still would.
Okay.
The whole point
There's
is
you
still would not know is the point
it's a racist
of that
point.
Comment. They could be any color,
These are people of
and
color.
you would still not know is the point.
Yeah, but they are making an inference with the fact that these are not white faces. Okay. And they are...
Sure. This could be 1,000 white people, and this could be the president of Japan going, hey, we can't let 1,000 white refugees into our country. The point can be made across any sort of color, skin,
but it's more significant
xenophobia.
when it's this, okay?
They shouldn't. I wouldn't let a bunch of white refugees into my country, that's for sure. They can go back to where they came from.
So it's an individual by individual basis. That's what it is.
It's also significant that, immediately afterwards, they... one of our politicians called Joe Cox, who was an advocate for refugees, was stabbed to death by a Britain First supporter. Britain First is one of the far-right groups in the UK.
He stabbed someone to death?
Yes.
Damn.
A terrorist, yes. So we had a terrorist incident in the middle of all of this. And I think it draws important parallels to what happened also in the States with Charlottesville. And there are consequences of these kinds of narratives. I would say that they charge and they politically charge the population, and they are creating.
How truthful are they is a big question.
Did you see the white missionary that's making the news in Uganda at the hotel, slapping around Ugandan hotel receptionists in the name of Jesus Christ? He's a missionary doing work out there, and he's slapping around these black people, calling racial slurs, and he's literally throwing punches. It's disturbing.
The whole fact that this, that is not people arriving in the UK. That's an artificial enemy they're creating, and they are creating hatred against people who are in the UK, who, are suffering from. There was a massive spike in violence. And hate crimes right after this vote and around this vote.
Oh, damn.
It's been horrifying. And, this kind of rhetoric does drive up violence. You can't measure
pitting people
it
against each
in
other instead
absolutely.
of with each other. Yeah.
And so maybe we want to play that next clip. So this is the communication director of Leave.eu. And these people talked about
Andy Wigmore.
Andy Wigmore,
and
yes.
And he's the one in the middle on the right.
In the middle. And this is on not inauguration day, the day that Donald Trump won the election. They were all partying together. The Leave.eu campaign crew as well with Donald Trump.
The propaganda machine of the Nazis, for instance, if you take away all the hideous horror and all that kind of stuff, it was very clever the way they managed to do what they did. And if you in its pure marketing sense, you think, oh, okay, you can see the logic of what they were saying, why they were saying, and how they presented things, and the imagery, everything from that. You think, oh, okay, and that is propaganda. ISIS, interestingly.
12 steps or whatever it is.
No, but you know this. But I, looking at that in hindsight now, having been at the sharp end of this campaign, you think, crikey. This is not new.
No.
And it's using the tools that you have at the time. I think 2016 was unique. I don't think you could ever repeat it. And I don't think you could ever repeat the techniques that people had used in 2016. It was of its time.
Oh, really?
And Twitter and Facebook were of its time for political campaign. You could never repeat that.
So this is the guy that I interviewed, Andy Wigmore.
What was the main pull for you from that clip?
I think it was the fact that it came out of nowhere for me. I wasn't asking either of these people about Nazis or Hitler. I was asking them about 2016 and what went on with the EU referendum, and this is what spontaneously came out of them, was justifications of the Nazis. This guy is basically saying how clever the Nazis were, their propaganda. It's something he admires, you know, and Nigel Oakes similarly was talking about that strategy in a glowing way. Now, I think that says everything about who these people are that are reshaping politics right now. These are really significant figures, and they have put huge amounts of money into influencing our media and spreading hatred, hateful narratives around both in the US and in the UK, and also through, you know, Breitbart and so forth, all these different right-wing media sources that are spreading out across Europe as well. It's not just in the US.
I hate fluorescent light bulbs and drop ceilings, you know, when they used to have the high ceilings and then they put drop ceilings. I hate that. Paneling too, wood paneling over nice plastered walls. I can't stand that.
The comedic relief is so good right now because this is such an insane topic.
I know.
Yeah, I'm still gonna kick your ass at the end of this show for your ignorance.
I might need another glass of wine.
Yeah, go ahead, garçon, please. Thank you.
Shout out. Thank you.
That's my boy, Mark Ramos.
Yeah,
I would not
Mark.
be him to blame for
Mark.
bringing me back to San Francisco for sure.
Damn.
Thank you.
Okay, so now just to you know, let's see if we can include a little bit of what the medium was that's used for this. I really just want to completely push all my marbles into like the globalism table and into the everybody love everyone table and to the stop the separation table and then, you know, as you stop the separation between people and as you bring the love together across the world.
I'm not sure we're ever gonna do that.
Yeah. And what you know, and however the bandages are mended to this, I'm like, you know, I'd love to push all my marbles into that as soon as possible.
You lost your marbles,
you know, but I think there are certain forces that are continuing to drive, whether it be the corporate greed and power obsession over division stuff, or whether it be the insanity of ISIS and other places of the world that are murdering people, that these evil forces around the world, wherever they are, however they're manipulating the social fabric, I do not think those are my friends.
No.
And that's the way that I feel about things. So I don't subscribe to the everyone love everyone just yet, because there is a bunch of the evil bullshit forces. I'm not going to go hug a guy with an AK-47 that wants to blow my brains out.
Of course not.
Well, why not? Mr. Lover, you know, peace, love, and happiness. What the fuck's the answer then?
There are complex problems. It's a hard time.
He's going to take offense. You don't want to talk to him and understand where he's coming from. You're going to avoid him. That's exactly why we take a very nuanced and multivariate perspective across everything. All right, now to slam out a couple of these last thoughts, and you tell me if we missed important things, but I just want to make sure that we address this. The medium that everything is being used for propaganda is mostly digital.
Yeah.
This is mostly social, mostly through Facebook. And so this is the psychometric profiling of people.
Sure.
This is knowing that when
we consume a lot of information that way these days. So yes, of course they're
if
going
I've liked
use that.
If I've liked a Facebook page like Breitbart or something that's pro-war, anti-Muslim, or whatever it may be, that's created some sort of a psychometric profile of me. That is then, if I'm shown an ad that is for me to feel safe because it's anti-Muslim or pro-war or etc., then I'm more likely to react to it with hate. I'm more likely to have that's part of the propaganda machine.
And it's not quite so simplistic as that.
Yes, please unpack.
I would say that, I mean, people also don't just absorb things and parrot them back in an extremely simplistic way. But the way that our propaganda has developed through digital means has been really enhanced by the modes of the ability to essentially carry out corporate surveillance, if you like. It's kind of, these platforms are surveilling us at all times. We are being watched when we are buying things, when we are searching the internet for God knows what. And there are, all of this says an awful lot about how we think, what we perceive the world to be like, and what we think of others, and so on, and just aspects of our personality, for example, are really reflected in the kind of things we say online, and what we share and what we buy and so on. And what you can do is to shape communications around that. And perhaps you're not going to turn someone who's a Hillary Clinton supporter into a Trump supporter. But that's kind of, information might help you to dissuade them from voting, or to channel their vote, make them perhaps more interested in another candidate, perhaps. Or, it might even just sow a few seeds of doubt. And I think it's really important also that it sort of shows you how to evaluate people's triggers in ways that perhaps we didn't before. So there are things like, neuroticism, or how open someone is, or, which you wouldn't have been able to assess in a pre-digital age. But now there are tools that enable you to do that online. And that was how they were able to get such great accuracy, was using these kinds of sort of not just purchasing, but also personality data that was gained through our through things like Facebook and so forth. So that kind of information layered on many other types of information, they can gain such a clear profile of us that, even things like the colors can be shaped in ways that might trigger our anxieties a little bit more deeply than previously, which kind of has sort of an Orwellian sort of inference, really, but it's not so unusual in this day and age. It's something that other companies have done. But the really interesting thing about Cambridge Analytica was the fact that they were drawing on tools that were coming from this central hub that was shared with a military contractor. Those methodologies that they were drawing on were developed with DARPA, the military research facilities. They were developed through working on counterterrorism by talking to terrorists and so forth. It was also...
Just quickly unpack that last sentence a little bit more.
Well, they would do research with, like we were saying, on target audience analysis. They would do things like interviewing terrorists. And so they would be, for example, assessing the kinds of personalities and so on, and traits that somebody might have, as well as the circumstances they were in, doing sort of social science research with terrorists.
On the terrorist?
Yes.
So they're doing social science research on the terrorist?
On terrorists.
Okay, and what does DARPA...
This is the defense contractor.
What do they uncover by doing social sance research on the terrorist? What do they understand?
How terrorists think,
what terrorists think,
they might respond to, why they're doing what they're doing, their emotional and psychological state.
This is all a very good thing, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, okay.
I'm not saying...
Okay, this is all a very good thing.
I'm not saying nobody should do that.
Okay. So we're trying to understand the way terrorists think to prevent terrorism. Fantastic. And then how is that bad?
This is people like Nigel Oakes, who we just heard talking.
Okay, so SCL Group taking information that the military
and
has...
that was...
how is that bad
so
then?
that was then fed into this research hub, the Behavioral Dynamics Institute, which was a central hub for developing methodology for the whole of the SCL group. And then Cambridge Analytica, who are an elections company, was set up with an ability to access all of this knowledge. And we don't really know what knowledge they borrowed from in order to develop the kind of methodology that they deployed in our elections.
So we don't know if Cambridge Analytica took information
They
from
definitely were using this hub.
They were using
Nigel
the hub.
Oakes told me that it couldn't have been done without him.
Without that hub?
Yes.
Okay.
And without the methodologies of the BDI. Yes.
We're at 65 minutes.
Thank you, Ron. Okay. This is absolutely insanely fascinating and so nuanced. I know nothing about this. I'm trying to learn about it.
Sure.
Yeah, it's a very, very difficult subject because it is literally there's division, there's greed and power, there's xenophobia,
Absolutely.
There's propaganda, deep fakes, social media, psychometrics. I mean, just those things that we just listed are so insanely emotional, and they're insanely, like, how do we figure out how to work together as a bunch of advanced chimpanzees on this rock?
Damn it. Very hard. Very hard.
I'm grateful to have people like you that have went deep into this and are here to teach and enrich and inspire. Thank you for coming on to the show.
It's fun when I find people who want to learn. I love talking about this. I'm very geeky over propaganda.
Let's at least get a couple of simulation questions in, because I want to know.
Sounds good. Yeah, let's hear what Emma has to say about them. Yeah, we'll definitely have to do a little bit of a
You're going to edit.
At any rate, Emma, thanks for being you.
No, I mean, we'll have to do a part 2 when you're back. When you're back in the area, or when we come to the United Kingdom, there will need to be a part 2 because there's too much to unpack, and this is just a tiny little scratch on the surface. So yeah,
we're going to the UK.
Yeah. Patreon, let's get there. All right, ticket sales, let's get there. All right, couple simulation questions on the way out. First question is, do you think we are alone in the cosmos?
Well, I heard they found water on Mars, I think, or something, so I don't know.
Who left
I think there's
there?
probably some amoebas out there somewhere.
What about rocks orbiting other stars that are in the habitable zone? You think some intelligent species could have evolved on those?
Possibly. I have no idea. I'll be honest, I don't stay awake at night wondering if there's aliens. We have enough of crazy shit in this.
You stay awake at night
world.
Talking about propaganda and thinking about propaganda science.
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly.
And sociology, yeah.
We have enough to worry about here.
Yeah. Okay, how about, do you think we're in a simulation?
Just no. If it were a simulation, it's very fucking weird.
Maybe that's exactly what is going on.
Yes, absolutely. Truman Show.
It's so damn weird. Yeah, it's just perfectly weird enough.
If it is a simulation, can I get out?
That's what death is for.
I took the wrong pill there, I think,
Okay, last question. I think you'll have more of a, I actually can give a really good answer to this.
Okay, sure.
What do you think is the most beautiful thing in the world?
Oh, crumbs.
What British word did you just say?
Crumbs.
Crumbs. It's the filler word for oh shit.
Is it really cheesy if I say being in love?
Do you have someone that you're in love with right now?
No.
But in the past?
Yeah.
And you thought that was
the most beautiful thing in the world, yeah.
I love Chinese food.
Nothing is more beautiful
I love the
than
Pink
Chinese
Floyd
food
Dark Side of the Moon record. I love my disco shoes.
I love lots of things, but
Emma, what about love? What about
it?
Yeah, what about love is most beautiful for you? Why?
Why? Just the ability for it to totally and utterly knock you off this planet and make you feel like there is nothing that matters beyond that. And it feels beautiful. It fills your entire body. And there is nothing else in this world that feels like it. It's incredible.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Yeah. There's just
everything stops.
The feeling is, it's crazy.
Incredible.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's pretty special. It's unique.
Yeah. Thank you for that, and thank you for all of the so much complexity and depth in what you've been researching and teaching us about. Thanks so much for coming on to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah. Thanks everyone for watching.
Thanks for visiting Stanford and being a visiting scholar.
Well, I hope I'll come back. Maybe.
We hope to have you back. We hope to have you back in the Bay Area on the show. We hope to come visit in the UK and talk to the other smart people that are in the UK researching so many other incredible and important fields. Awesome. Everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. If you guys had a good time, give us a comment below. Let us know your thoughts. Give us some links to some things that you're reading about this and learning about it. There's so much to learn. Emma's website's also below. Go check out her website. Go check out her further research. And go check out her books as well.
And do check out the fake news inquiry evidence. There's a lot more of these clips that you heard. So I think people need to hear those.
Yeah. Because hearing them definitely gives you a much more deeper understanding.
But read the analysis as well. There's 3 essays I wrote to accompany them, and that has more information.
Yep. Give them a listen. Read the essays. Let us know your thoughts. So like I said, below, subscribe, join the Familia. Also, give the content a share. Don't just consume this content, but go create with it. Go write about it. Go make videos about it. Go start companies about it. Go do your thing.
Do your own propaganda research. Become critics.
What are you doing, son? Oh, propaganda research right now, Mom. So also join us on Patreon, help us scale the effort, help us go and make impact on more people across the world. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, Ron, our producer, director. Thanks to our teammates that are here right now. Mark, Alfredo, much love to you guys as well. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Peace.